The first orange will boot clicked shut at exactly 2:47 on a warm Sunday afternoon, and the woman standing beside the SUV laughed because she honestly thought somebody was joking. 10 seconds later, she realized nobody was joking, and by the time the third person came running out of the clubhouse yelling that their front tire had been locked too, half the neighborhood had gathered along Cedar Ridge Lane, staring at a row of expensive cars frozen in place like somebody had hit pause on the whole street. The funny part was nobody there had seen it coming, and the even funnier part was every single one of those people had spent the last 6 years telling the rest of us the rules were the rules. My name's Owen Mercer, and I've lived in Maple Hollow, Tennessee for a little over 9 years. It's the kind of neighborhood real estate agents describe with phrases like quiet family community and well-maintained amenities, which sounds nice until you actually move in and discover that well-maintained usually means a small group of retirees with laminated binders and too much free time watching every mailbox and driveway like they're guarding a military checkpoint. Most folks around here kept their heads down, smile at the mailbox, wave during Halloween, mow your grass on time, and avoid conflict. I was one of those people too for a long while. I like my house. I like my neighbors. I liked grilling on the weekends and hearing cicadas at sunset. I didn't come here looking for a fight. But then Grant Holloway became HOA president. Grant was polished in that dangerous kind of way, always tucked in polo shirt, perfect handshake, expensive watch nobody mentioned but everybody noticed. He had this calm voice that made him sound reasonable even when he was saying something ridiculous. First year he seemed fine. Organized landscaping, got new lights installed by the clubhouse, helped repaint the tennis fence. Then little by little the whole thing shifted. He started quoting bylaws like scripture, started carrying printed notices folded in his back pocket, started acting less like a neighbor and more like a guy auditioning to run City Hall. My next-door neighbor Linda found that out first when her daughter parked her minivan with a rear bumper barely over the painted curb marker. 40 minutes later, the thing was gone. Towed. Linda stood in her driveway holding a grocery bag and staring at the empty curb like somebody had stolen the family dog. Cost her $240 to get it back. Grant told her with a straight face, policies only work when they're applied consistently. Then came the Harrisons. Their delivery driver stopped out front with a new refrigerator, maybe half an hour tops. Grant fined them $180 because commercial vehicles weren't permitted curbside beyond 20 minutes. I wish I were exaggerating. The moment I personally stopped brushing it off was Christmas Eve. My younger brother Caleb drove in from Nashville with his wife and parked outside my place because our driveway was full. We were halfway through dinner, literally carving ham at the kitchen island, when I heard the screen door rattle. I opened it, and there was a violation notice tucked under the mat. $150. Unauthorized curbside parking. Caleb looked over my shoulder and said, "You've got to be kidding." I wanted to laugh, but honestly I was too irritated. Grant had apparently walked over, photographed the truck, and filed the notice before dessert. "Merry Christmas." And the whole time he kept repeating the same line anytime somebody complained. No parking means no parking. No exceptions. Fine. If that had truly been the rule, maybe I would have hated it, but respected it. Problem was every quarter the HOA hosted these social mixers at the clubhouse. Wine and catered sandwiches, little folding tables, people pretending they enjoyed hearing committee updates before eating brownies. And every single time, the curb along Cedar Ridge Lane filled up bumper to bumper with guest vehicles. Nobody ticketed. Nobody warned. Nobody towed. Cars sat there 3 and 4 hours while Grant walked around shaking hands like a mayor at a ribbon cutting. The first time I noticed it, I shrugged. Second time, it bothered me. Third time, I brought it up casually to my friend Nate, who lives 2 houses over, and he just snorted and said, "Rules are only real when they're for us." That line stayed with me longer than I expected. Maybe because deep down I already knew he was right. Maybe because I spent 8 years before moving here working code enforcement for Williamson County, and I've got a habit I never really lost. When something feels off, I go looking for paperwork. So I started documenting. Nothing dramatic, just quiet. I attended every HOA social event that year. I parked farther down the block and walked over with a coffee in hand like everybody else. Took time-stamped photos on my phone. Logged plate numbers. Arrival times. Departure times. Which vehicles parked where. Then I went back through every violation notice I could verify from residents willing to compare paperwork. Linda had hers in a kitchen drawer. The Harrisons kept copies. Mrs. Delaney had 3. I built a spreadsheet one rainy weekend, and the pattern was impossible to ignore. Dozens of fines for residents, 0 enforcement during HOA events. Not one. And then something even more interesting surfaced. While checking the county parcel maps, I pulled up the frontage line in front of my property, mostly out of curiosity, and I just sat there staring at the screen. Zoomed in, zoomed back out, checked again, pulled the archive subdivision survey from 1989, then the assessor's record. Same answer every time. That stretch of curb directly in front of my lot. It wasn't common HOA property at all. Never had been. It legally belonged to my parcel. Private frontage, which meant Grant had spent years policing a curb he didn't actually control. I remember leaning back in my desk chair laughing to myself because suddenly so many things made sense. The selective enforcement, the confidence, the speeches. He'd never bothered checking because nobody ever challenged him. And that's when the idea hit me, not fast, not like lightning, more like a door slowly swinging open. I could have confronted him right there. Could have marched to the next board meeting and dropped copies of the survey on the table. But honestly, after Christmas, after Linda's towing bill, after watching people quietly pay fines just to avoid headaches, I didn't want another argument in a fluorescent-lit clubhouse. I wanted Grant to experience his own rule exactly the way the rest of us had. Calmly, legally, publicly. So I filed paperwork with the county for a vehicle immobilization permit on private frontage, paid the fee, read every requirement twice, and 45 days before the HOA's fall social, I installed bright reflective signage at both ends of the curb. Unauthorized parking subject to immediate booting. Enforcement active. Fees apply. Big enough for anyone to see. Impossible to miss. Grant walked past that sign twice the week before the event, looked straight at it, and kept going, which told me everything I needed to know. By Sunday afternoon, the folding tables were out, string lights were glowing, and one by one cars started lining up exactly where they always did. And around 2:47, with the neighborhood laughing and chatting 20 yards away, I stepped out carrying the first bright orange wool boot in both hands. The first lock snapped into place with a clean metallic click, sharp enough that I heard it echo off the clubhouse windows. But nobody turned around because inside people were still talking over one another and balancing paper plates on their laps. And for a second, I just stood there looking at that bright orange boot wrapped around the front tire of a silver Lexus, thinking about every warning letter Grant had slipped under somebody's door over the years and how fast certainty can disappear when the rules suddenly point in a different direction. The second car took maybe 15 seconds, then the third, a white Tahoe, then a BMW, then Linda's cousin's pickup. I moved steadily, calm, methodical, no rushing, same exact process every time because I had practiced it beforehand and because weirdly enough my hands felt steadier than they had in months. There's something about knowing you're standing on solid legal ground that settles your heartbeat. By the time I locked the ninth one, the line of cars looked almost theatrical, orange boots glowing against polished tires under the afternoon sun. And that's when the clubhouse door opened. A woman named Teresa stepped out carrying lemonade and immediately stopped dead. She blinked, looked at the nearest wheel, then at the next one. "Oh my God," she said, and set the tray down so fast 2 cups tipped over. Another couple came behind her, then more. Within maybe 30 seconds, the whole sidewalk was crowded. Confused voices everywhere. Somebody laughed because they assumed it had to be a prank. Somebody else crouched and tugged on a lock and realized very quickly it was absolutely not a prank. "Who did this?" somebody yelled. "What the hell is going on?" Then I heard the voice I had been expecting all afternoon. Owen. Grant Holloway walked out through the clubhouse doors with that polished smile he always wore, except this time it lasted maybe 1 second before he saw the curb. His face dropped so fast, it almost would have been funny if I hadn't spent a year getting to that exact moment. He strode toward me with his jaw tight. "What exactly are you doing?" I pointed to the sign nearest the mailbox. "Enforcing posted private parking restrictions." He stared at me. "This curb is community access. No, I said calmly. It isn't. A few neighbors leaned closer. I could feel everybody listening. Grant lowered his voice. Take those off. Absolutely, I said. Once the fee's paid. I got a reaction. Teresa actually laughed out loud from pure disbelief. Fee? She asked. I nodded. $200 per vehicle, payable on site. Same as posted. Grant looked like steam might start coming out of his ears. You cannot immobilize vehicles here. Actually, I said, reaching into my folder, I can. Then I handed him copies. County assessor map, parcel boundary, vehicle immobilization permit, filing confirmation, photos of posted signage with timestamps. Every page clean and organized. Grant flipped through them faster than he meant to, and I watched the color drain from his face. This can't be right. County says otherwise. This is harassment. Interesting word, I said. Carol used a different one when her van got towed for being 4 inches over. A couple people exchanged looks. Linda, who had just arrived with Nate from across the lane, folded her arms and said loud enough for everyone to hear, I still have that towing receipt, by the way. Grant ignored her and took out his phone. Phoenix. He dialed city enforcement. Everyone stood there listening. He explained loudly, emphasizing private nuisance and unauthorized immobilization, and trying very hard to sound confident. Then he paused, listened. His expression tightened. Yes, I understand, he said, but this is an HOA neighborhood. Pause. Yes. Longer pause. Then quieter. Thank you. He hung up. Nobody spoke. Nate raised one eyebrow. Grant immediately called someone else. His attorney. That part actually took less time than I expected. My attorney, a local property lawyer named Beth Kendrick, had already been briefed and was apparently waiting for the call because Grant paced beside the clubhouse for 7 straight minutes looking like a man trying to outrun a bad dream. He gestured a lot. He pointed at the curb, at me, at the paperwork. Then finally he stopped, listened, and said nothing at all. He ended the call without another word. That silence changed everything. Because until then, some people still assumed there had to be a misunderstanding. But when Grant's own lawyer couldn't bail him out, the whole crowd felt it. Teresa leaned toward another board member and whispered something. Mr. Donnelly shook his head and muttered, well, I'll be damned. One by one, the vehicle owners approached me. Some annoyed, some embarrassed, most trying to act like they weren't furious while also realizing they had zero leverage. I stayed polite. Every single time. I know it's frustrating. Signage was posted 45 days ago. County permit's valid. Payment removes the boot immediately. One guy in loafers muttered under his breath and paid anyway. Another woman checked the sign, squinted, sighed, and pulled out her card. Linda stood nearby, pretending not to enjoy herself quite as much as she clearly was. At one point, she leaned toward me and whispered, best Sunday this neighborhood's had in years. I nearly lost it trying not to laugh. Grant didn't say much after that. He just stood there near the walkway with his arms folded so tightly he looked carved out of stone while neighbors paid and the boots came off one by one. But what really got to him wasn't the fees. It was the conversations happening around him. People started comparing notices, shitting Phoenix, mentioning warnings they'd never brought up before. Nate talked about a landscaping citation from spring. Mrs. Delaney brought out copies she'd kept in a drawer. Somebody mentioned a legal expense line item from the HOA budget nobody understood. Once people start talking openly in neighborhoods like Maple Hollow, the silence disappears fast. Grant tried to pull everyone back into the clubhouse. Let's all calm down and continue the event. Nobody moved. Teresa looked right at him and said, actually, I'd like to hear more about that budget. And just like that, the mood shifted completely. It stopped being about parked cars. It became about 6 years of people swallowing frustration because they figured pushing back wasn't worth it. I remember standing there holding the last unlocked boot while the sunlight started turning gold and hearing Grant snap. This is exactly why rules exist. Linda answered before anyone else could. No, she said dead calm. Rules exist so everybody gets treated the same. That landed hard. Grant had no response. He looked at me one last time and said quietly, you planned this. I met his eyes and said, no, Grant, you did. I just read the paperwork. For a second, I honestly thought he might yell. Instead, he just looked exhausted, like all that authority he'd worn for years had suddenly gotten too heavy to carry. By sunset, the curb was empty. The folding tables were still half covered in untouched desserts, and half the neighborhood remained outside talking in clusters. I packed the last boot into the garage while Beth texted me one sentence: clean execution. Then my phone buzzed again. Linda, 3 of us are filing a formal request tomorrow for an independent audit. You in? I looked toward the clubhouse where Grant stood alone inside the doorway under fluorescent lights. Staring out at a street he no longer controlled the way he thought he did, and I texted back one word: absolutely. By Monday morning, Maple Hollow felt different, and I know that sounds dramatic for a suburban neighborhood with matching mailboxes and people walking golden retrievers before breakfast, but the air genuinely changed overnight. Usually Monday mornings were quiet around Cedar Ridge Lane, sprinklers ticking, garage doors humming open, everybody headed to work pretending not to notice one another until evening. That morning people actually stopped and talked. Linda stood by her driveway with coffee and waved me over before I even grabbed the newspaper. Nate was already there. Teresa came walking up from the clubhouse with a folder in her hand. Nobody was whispering anymore. Nobody was pretending everything had been normal. The request for an independent audit went in before lunch with 3 signatures, then 5, then 8 by late afternoon. Once folks saw the numbers, they got bolder. Questions started surfacing fast. Landscaping reimbursements, legal fees, vendor invoices approved without review. Tiny things people ignored for years suddenly looked a lot bigger under daylight. Grant stayed quiet for 3 days. No emails, no neighborhood updates, no reminders about trash bins or holiday decorations. Then Thursday evening, an HOA notice landed in every mailbox announcing a special leadership transition meeting the following Tuesday. That phrase alone made Linda laugh so hard she nearly spilled her iced tea. Everybody already knew what it meant. Grant resigned the day before auditors arrived. No dramatic speech, no apology, just a short typed statement thanking the board for the opportunity to serve and saying he was stepping aside for personal reasons. That was it. 6 years of acting like the final authority in Maple Hollow, and the exit fit on half a page. The auditor spent 2 weeks reviewing records. They found enough sloppy bookkeeping to keep the new board busy for months, nothing criminal, but enough favoritism and questionable approvals to make people pretty uncomfortable. 30 days after the audit began, the curbside parking bylaw quietly disappeared from the community rules. No vote, no debate, just removed, like it had never existed. That part honestly made me laugh more than anything else. A rule that caused years of headaches vanished without a word the second somebody actually challenged the foundation underneath it. Funny how that works. A few neighbors later asked if I regretted going that far. Fair question, and truthfully, I thought about it. Maybe more than I expected. I'm not someone who enjoys embarrassing people. I didn't wake up one morning hoping to turn a Sunday mixer into neighborhood theater. I kept replaying that moment when Grant looked at the paperwork and realized the ground under him had shifted. There was anger there, sure, but there was something else too. Pride, maybe fear, maybe the weight of a guy who spent so long convincing himself he was protecting the neighborhood that he forgot he was supposed to live in it with the rest of us. Power does strange things in small communities. It starts with "I'm helping out," then becomes "trust me, I know best." Then one day you're writing violation notices on Christmas Eve and genuinely believing you're the reasonable one. A week after he resigned, I saw Grant for the first time. Just him, walking alone near the mailboxes around sunset. No clipboard, no folder. He looked older somehow, tired. He nodded when he saw me. I nodded back. He stopped for a second like he wanted to say something, then just looked toward the curb and gave the smallest half-smile I'd ever seen from him. "Guess I should have read the survey," he said. I almost laughed. Probably would have saved everybody a lot of trouble. He gave one quiet breath through his nose, not quite a laugh, not quite anything else. Then he said, "Maybe," and he kept walking. That was the last real conversation we ever had. These days the curb stays mostly empty unless someone's visiting, and nobody says a word about it. Kids ride bikes past the clubhouse. Neighbors still bring casseroles when somebody's sick. The world didn't end. Maple Hollow survived just fine without a self-appointed parking sheriff. If anything, people seem lighter now, more willing to talk, less nervous about every tiny rule. But every once in a while, I'll glance out my front window and remember that row of 9 bright orange boots glowing in the Tennessee sunlight, while half the neighborhood stood there stunned into silence. And I still smile. Not because somebody got embarrassed, not even because I won. Mostly because for one strange Sunday afternoon, the rules became exactly what they were always supposed to be, equal for everybody. And I'll be honest, I still go back and forth on whether I handled it the right way. Maybe I should have confronted Grant privately. Maybe I should have brought the records to a meeting first. Or maybe some people never listen until consequences show up bright enough to see from the clubhouse doors. I don't know. That part's yours to decide. So tell me this. If somebody in your neighborhood spent years enforcing rules they didn't even legally control, would you have done what I did, or would you have handled it differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I genuinely want to hear where you land on this one. And if you've ever had your own HOA nightmare, trust me, you are definitely not the only one.